maybe in an advisory capacity, I should admonish you guys to hold on to your wallets because the General Assembly is about to be back in session. It's coming up next week. We told you during the holidays, I said, before you know it, the 2024 election cycle will be all over us. And before that happens, the General Assembly will be all over us. Toward that end, we have scheduled visits with a couple of the leaders in both bodies of the General Assembly. Tomorrow, the Speaker of the House will be in studio with us right around 1:05 in the afternoon. Cameron Sexton will be here. And today, the Senate Majority Leader, Jack Johnson, is stopping by to talk about what we can anticipate out of the General Assembly. Jack, it is always good to speak with you. I hope you're well, sir.
Happy New Year. Good to be back with you. And might I remind you that Tennessee is the lowest tax state in the nation. So you can make your jokes about grabbing your wallet, but Republicans...
Wait a minute. Are you implying there's room for expansion?
No. We Republicans have been in control of the Tennessee General Assembly for 12 years now, and we have cut taxes every single year we've been in control. I don't think this year will be any different.
Hey, I would note, I mean, toward your toward what you just said, I was looking at the... have you seen this U-Haul list? I'm very proud of this.
Yes.
U-Haul released an annual, it's called the U-Haul Migration Trend Report for 2023. And do you see where Tennessee ranked?
I haven't seen it recently. I've seen it in the past, but where do we stand
Number
now?
5. Number 5, the 5th state in the country, the top 5 states in the country to experience the most movers using one-way U-Haul equipment. Obviously, it's not a scientific study because people use other things other than U-Haul, but
a lot of people do.
Good indicator. Number 1, Texas. All right, that's fine. We love our brothers and sisters over in Texas. Number 2, Florida. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Florida's big time. Number 3, North Carolina. That makes sense. Number 4, I'm a little surprised. South Carolina slipped in there ahead of Tennessee.
Interesting. Okay.
And then number 5, Tennessee. All states run by Republicans. All states with the Republican majorities in their various legislative bodies. So that bodes well for the Republican Party moving forward in 2024.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned 5, and 3 of those 5, Tennessee included, do not have a state income tax. So that's probably driving some of people's...
I think so, yes.
We used to make a joke. I've made the joke before. It'll cost you something like $1,500 to rent a small U-Haul trailer from California to Tennessee, and they'll pay you $500 if you'll take it back. So.
Yeah, they ran out of U-Hauls.
Yeah, they need people to bring their U-Hauls back to California.
I was joking with somebody over the holiday. It was unrelated to this story about U-Haul, but I'm like, California has so much exodus. They broke a system they broke the economic model of U-Haul. Right? Their economic model was that on balance, you'll see as much coming back and going. And then California broke that model. Poor you all.
Oh man.
So what are you expecting? What is your world like right now as Senate Majority Leader? Are you doing pre-meetings and, kind of game planning the session?
Yeah, so a lot of conversations going on, and I am excited. I always look forward to the beginning of session. It's kind of like a big family reunion, get to see fellow members, get in that groove, if you will, that flow of the legislative process. It's very busy. It's very intense. We have a very finite legislative calendar that we're in session. It's not predetermined, but, we're in about 3 to 4 months out of the year, and then we go home, and that's a good way to run a government. So obviously, bills are being filed, being drafted. Getting into the weeds a little bit, this will be the second session of the 113th General Assembly. Every General Assembly is 2 years and has 2 sessions. You may have special sessions like we had back last summer. But so this is the second session of the 113th General Assembly. Any bills that were filed last year that have not been acted upon are still viable. They're still alive, and so there's still a lot of bills out there for consideration. But you can also file new legislation. So members are having bills drafted, getting them filed, introduced into the system. House members are calling senators saying, hey, I've got a bill. Would you be willing to sponsor it in the Senate? Senators are calling House members asking if they'd be interested in sponsoring legislation. Our bill filing deadline will fall around the 1st of February, and that's when all bills have to be in the system. And then they get referred to committee, and we're off to the races.
What would you consider to be priority number 1 in this session?
Well, first and foremost, I always start with the budget. It's the most important thing we do. It's the only constitutional responsibility we have. Literally, we could convene our legislative session, pass a budget, and go home. and not pass a single other bill.
Can we do that? I mean, I guess there's a few things that we ought to do that would be good ideas.
There are, and I always remind people that if you want to deregulate, if you want to remove something from the Tennessee Code Annotated, it takes a bill to do that as well. And we do a lot of that, do a lot of streamlining and modernizing things.
I always say saying no is an affirmative act.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So obviously the budget, we're the best managed fiscally managed state in the nation, and we're in great fiscal condition, but we are starting to see some headwinds. We're starting to see the effects of the disastrous policies of the Biden administration. The hyperinflation, obviously interest rates going up. We're seeing some slowdown in the Tennessee economy. A reminder to your listeners, we derive roughly 2/3 of our revenue from sales taxes. So we are very prone to ups and downs and swings in the economy. And that's why we're so conservative with our budget. When it's really good and the economy is humming, we don't spend that money. We don't spend all of that money. We might spend a little bit, but we're very conservative with our budget. So obviously we're going to be mindful of that. And then the other thing, you've talked about it. A lot of people are very excited about the governor's school choice initiative. I'll be the sponsor of that, along with the Education Committee Chairman, Senator John Lundberg, to provide education freedom scholarships to all Tennessee children.
On the budget front, and forgive me for not knowing, but that's why we have you here, is there a fund dedicated to kind of leveling out some of those peaks and valleys with regard to sales tax revenue going up and down during the bad times? I mean, COVID comes to mind. I would imagine, I was not here in 2020, 2021, but I would bet that those are pretty lean times for government, in addition to lean times for businesses who are suffering as a result.
Absolutely. And to further complicate that, we base our budget on a forecasted revenue number. So as we convene here on Tuesday and we start talking about the budget will be for fiscal year 24-25, beginning July 1 of 2024, running through June 30 of 25. And we use a forecast, and so things can happen during that time. And COVID is a great example of that. COVID happened right in the middle of a fiscal year, and the economy came to a complete stop. So what we do to help manage that is a couple of things. Number one, we have recurring surpluses. If we're not having a surplus, we're not doing our job, because we don't know the exact amount of money we're going to have to deal with. So we're very conservative. So you want us every year to come in and say, hey, yeah, we collected a lot more than we forecasted we would collect. And what we do with that is we'll use that money sometimes for one-time expenses and not even recognize an increase in the base. And that's a very conservative way to handle your budget. Additionally, we do have a rainy day fund. It's at an all-time high, about $1.8 billion, I believe we have in our rainy day fund, that's just sitting there in case something catastrophic happens.
Let's turn our attention to education. Tell me why this is such a good deal for Tennessee families.
Well, ultimately, education is such an important part of what we do as a state government, and we do it in partnership with our local governments. We have school boards, roughly 140 school systems across the state, and I'm talking about public education. And obviously, there are a lot of great private schools, a great homeschool community in Tennessee. We have done a lot, and we've talked about it. Third grade retention. We've appropriated an additional $1 billion recurring money for public education. We've focused like a laser on trying to improve our educational outcomes for our public schools in Tennessee. But a key component of that is to empower parents. And we did that in a more limited fashion in 2019. We passed an education savings account bill that applied for Davidson, Shelby, and then later we added in Hamilton County. And that was based on families that are zoned for failing schools. So if you're a parent and your child is zoned, your public school down the street, and they're just not getting the job done, we created an education savings account so you can put your child in a different type of educational environment. We need to expand that. Every parent in Tennessee should be able to choose the best educational alternative for their child. And that's what this bill will do.
Why so much anger about it?
Well, I think there's some misinformation. I think that there are some out there who misrepresent what true education freedom means. And for me, what it means, and I'm a parent of 3 kids that all went to Williams County Public Schools, got a great education, great teachers. We were obviously very engaged parents. We're not anti-public education. Roughly 85% of our kids today, Matt, attend a public school of some sort. This education freedom scholarship bill, as proposed by Governor Lee, is not going to change that number to any great extent, but there are families and unique circumstances all across the state. It may be your child has a unique learning need. It may be that the faith is important to you, and you want your kid in a school system that also teaches the Bible and prays. There are all manner of things. So I've just always been and long been an advocate of school choice. But there are people out there, you ask why people do get angry about it, and many do, and they think it's a threat to public education. It absolutely is not a threat to public education. And we, as Republicans in control of the Tennessee state government over the last 5 to 10 years, I think we've demonstrated we are committed to public schools.
The money that comes, and you'll broadly better educate me today about how money flows in our public education system. So the money that comes from the state, it's based on numbers of kids in the system, right?
That's right.
So is the anger based on the idea that some of those kids will get removed from certain systems, or some of the parents will choose to remove their children from certain systems, opting for a different educational opportunity? And so, I mean, I think it makes sense to me that if that child's not in the system, then that amount of money that the state contributes is no longer in the system as well. That's just, if somebody moves, that's the way that it works. Is that where the frustration comes from, is that they're worried about the money moving around?
Well, it may be for some, and I think that's misguided, and here's why. On average, loose numbers here, the state contributes about 2/3 of every dollar it takes to educate a child. 1/3 of that money comes from the local government.
Okay.
Now that varies widely. In Williamson County, most of the money comes from local government, and the state portion is a much smaller amount, because it's based on a number of different factors, but on average across the state. So when a child, let's say you have a child in Davidson County schools, and I don't know the exact amount that we're spending every year to educate a child between the local and the state money combined, but let's make up a number. Let's say it's $12,000 to $13,000 a year, but for that child. And the state's contributing, let's say, $8,000 or $9,000 of that. Well, the average statewide is about $7,000 per child. If a child leaves Davidson County Public Schools to go to a private school and they get a $7,000 Education Freedom Scholarship, the local government keeps all the money that they're putting in. Mm-hmm. It is actually net accretive to the local district for that child to leave and go to a private school.
And the money the state's using on the scholarship is in addition to monies that are already allocated for
from the
public
local
education.
Government. Exactly. Well,
it doesn't come out of the same till, or does it?
Well, ultimately, yes. If a child is in public schools right now and the state is appropriating a X number of dollars for that kid, and again, it's going to vary from system to system, but they leave that school will lose the state allocation, just the state portion of the money that is dedicated to educate that child.
Because the money follows the child.
Exactly. The state portion does, but the local government gets to keep their local portion of that money.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't view it as a threat financially or in any other manner to public education. And so that's going to be a lot of the conversation we're going to have over the next couple of months as we're debating this legislation and talking about it. But as you saw, a poll came out from the Beacon Center today, overwhelming support from all Tennesseans across the board. And it's a fundamental premise of the parent should decide what's best for their child.
I'm not here just to sing your praises, but I would say this, that I applaud the way the governor and leadership in both houses are approaching this. I expect that at the time the initial proposal was made, there had been a hope to make it a little more broad-based rather than limiting it to 3 counties, I guess it is.
Right. Yeah, today.
But now we're seeing this expansion to what, 20,000 scholarships total?
Yeah, to start with, correct.
And the hope, it's my understanding, is that if this works as expected, that it would be further expanded down the road.
It needs to be universal, and that's our ultimate goal, and I believe the governor's ultimate goal. I don't speak for the governor, but that's my understanding of his intention, that we get to a point at some point in the future where any child in the state of Tennessee can take one of these scholarships and go to the educational alternative that the parent believes is best for that child.
Do you believe the biggest impediment to this will be teachers' unions?
Well, that will be part of it, and school boards,
because they look at it as a threat.
They do, I think, and I think that's misguided. As I said, I don't believe it is a threat. In fact, ultimately, it could be a really good thing for education in general. But yeah, we're having great conversations with our school boards, our school superintendents. I've got meetings set up in the next few days with some of my local school boards, and that's happening all across the state. And the governor's people and the Department of Education have done a really good job, I think, of engaging with these stakeholder groups to realize, hey, this is not a threat. It's not an attack on public education. This is just good for kids.
When we come back, I want to talk to you about crime. I saw a story on the Tennessee Star website where over 30,000 residents have left Memphis in the last 6 or 7 years. And most of those individuals, who you can talk to say that they're doing so because of crime. I want to talk to you about what the state legislature can do to help alleviate Memphis crime, Nashville crime, and other areas that have seen a spike in crime over the last several years in the state of Tennessee. We'll do that with Senate Majority Leader Jack Johnson in just a moment. It's Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Yes, indeed. Back Jimmy Quick with Senate Majority Leader Jack Johnson on the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. 12:53. If you have a quick question for Jack, jump on the super text line at 615-737-9986. I'd love to hear from you about education or anything else perhaps taken up in the General Assembly. Over 30,000 residents, this report that I'm reading here, it says over 30,000 residents in Memphis and the surrounding communities between 2017 and 2022, so a 5-year span of time, left that area. The city shrunk by almost 5%. And a vast majority of the people who have been spoken with about this say that they're leaving in large part because of the crime situation that's going on in Memphis. We see naturally in our bigger communities in the state of Tennessee, Nashville, Memphis, maybe a little bit of Knoxville as well, you see higher crime rates. But in Memphis particularly, we see a lack of activity on the part of the district attorney there and the prosecutors more broadly in bringing some of these criminals to justice. There's a little bit of a soft on crime approach. What, if anything, can the General Assembly do to help alleviate these issues?
Well, let me first of all say you're exactly right. I was in Memphis with Senator Brent Taylor a couple of weeks ago, I guess, meeting with a number of local business leaders, community leaders to talk about the problem they're having down there, and it is very real. They are losing population. They're missing out on incredible economic development opportunities. There's companies that would like to come to Memphis, but they're worried about being able to hire people, get people to work there who will be willing to live in Memphis. I'll give you another example. St. Jude Children's Hospital, the world leader in cancer treatment for children. They were trying to recruit a Nobel Prize winning researcher from somewhere else. I think it was even another country to come and help as a researcher in pediatric oncology, and had them really close to coming to go to work, and they decided not to because of the crime. So those are a couple of anecdotal examples. It's a very, very serious problem. So what can we do? Number one, obviously continue to stiffen penalties on crimes. We can hold that DA accountable. We can hold the judges that are accountable down there. You had an individual that was charged with first-degree murder and was released with no bail on his own personal recognizance. That's absolutely unacceptable to have a person charged with first-degree murder back out on the streets with no accountability whatsoever. Another thing, our mutual friend, Aaron Gulbranson with the Tennessee Faith and Freedom Coalition, one of their big issues, and I very much look forward to working with them to fight human trafficking, which is a terrible problem all across the country and the world, but it's a problem here in Tennessee as well. And we've got legislation to empower our Attorney General, the Tennessee State Attorney General, Jonathan Skrmetti, to prosecute some of these crimes in areas where the local DA will not. Now, there's some constitutional issues there because DAs are very powerful. They've got broad authority to make decisions about who to prosecute and who to not prosecute. But I've spoken with police officers in Memphis, and they will tell you they have delivered people that they have caught in the commission of a crime, and they've got evidence. It is an open shut case, and those cases are being dismissed. And that's a failure of prosecutorial discretion.
Well, and we saw an example of that at Belmont University. The young lady's name escapes me right now, with the 18-year-old that got shot and killed. Tragic. And this was an individual that was a recidivist within the system in Davidson County, and sadly was out after a series of crimes there. So obviously that's an area of focus. In the couple of minutes that we have left, I don't want to leave this on the table. Does it concern you that, and maybe you guys in the Senate do, but we publicly have not seen any further information regarding the Covenant School Manifesto. It feels as if our legislative leadership, their hands are somewhat tied with how they move forward with something, if anything, that we can do to attempt to get people the mental health that they need if they have mental illness. There will be calls from the minority to do something about guns and red flag laws and all of that. How difficult is it for you, Jack, to do your job in the General Assembly
without that information.
Well, it does make it more difficult, and as you know, that is tied up in a legal morass, if you will. It's tied up in the courts, both federal and state, and so I don't hold out a lot of hope right now that those documents from the Covenant shooter will be made public. However, here's what we do know. That particular individual was desperately mentally ill. I know enough about the manifesto, the writings, if you want, and her background to know that she was desperately mentally ill. And that is a key part of the criminal justice aspect as well. We had some good conversations during special session. As you know, the Senate felt like some of these matters were better handled during regular session. So that will be a big part of what you hear us talking about relative to crime. It's not all of crime, but so much of crime is being perpetrated by people who need mental health treatment.
Well, and we saw the case in Belmont, not to interrupt you there, but the case in Belmont involved an individual who was not prosecuted for crimes because they were deemed unable to be prosecuted because of mental disability, yet they could not hold them, and so they released him.
Hey, Matt, her name was Jillian Ludwig.
Jillian Ludwig. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, and so you're right, but I think we may have talked about this on the air, but I'm familiar with at least a couple of other instances where someone was deemed to be unfit to stand trial, and they were held, and the judge ordered that they be incarcerated is not the right, but they be taken to a mental treatment facility and involuntarily committed. And you know what happens when you're involuntarily committed in the state of Tennessee? It becomes illegal for you to own, possess, or purchase a firearm.
Right.